free will in it. But this morning was so exciting, I had to do notes. Welcome to Heart's Discernment. Thank you all for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today is called I Went to Church on Sunday. So I have this little story that I want to read to you. Um, it's it really hit me hard when I was studying this out this morning. It says, imagine Judgment Day. Now, first of all, let me explain to you when we die, we believe that we are immediately in the presence of God. But what does that look like? I don't know. Maybe it says in the Bible, and I'm not there yet. I mean, we're only in First John, and then we have to go back and read the Old Testament. So maybe I just haven't gotten it there yet. But I know that you're in the presence of God. But does that mean there's like a crowd of people, like hundreds and billions of whatever of people, all there waiting for their judgment, or is it just boom, you're there and then you're sent wherever? I'm not there yet, okay? But imagine, if you will, for story's sake, you're in Judgment Day and you're in this great line. There's just, you're in the presence of God, but there's just people everywhere, and you're standing there and you're waiting. Um, imagine going to Cedar Point. Around here, it would be worlds of fun, but imagine they got this brand new ride, and the line is just zigzag back and forth all the way down around the park, and you're waiting in line like you're just so excited. You're nervous, but you're nervous because this is like a big drop, and this ride is just insane, and you're all excited but yet still nervous. And I feel like when I get to Judgment Day, that's how I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm finally going to. What if I didn't? That whole nerve-wracking thing. So I sit there, and if you're imagining this, okay, now imagine the Apostle Paul is standing right next to you. Like the Apostle Paul, right? It's Judgment Day, and the great Apostle Paul is standing right in front of you, and he says to you, hey, I'm Paul. What's your name? And you say, Paul, like the guy in the Bible, Paul? He says, yeah. You ask, like the Paul that was shipwrecked 5 times, stoned 3 times, and beaten, like that Paul? He says, yeah, that's me. Who are you? And I say, I'm Ginger. I'm a Christian. And Paul says, oh, what did you do for God? Imagine that for a minute. Apostle Paul turns around and looks at you. You know everything he did for the Father. And he says, oh, what did you do for God? I kind of got a little nauseous in my belly right now. Okay. And you say, or I say, I'm going to keep this in my present tense, I guess. "Well, I went to church on Sundays." Paul says, I thought you said you were a Christian. What do you mean you went to church on Sundays? What did you do for God? I say, well, I tithe faithfully. Uh, I don't know. I went to church. We sang a few songs, some slow ones, some fast ones, some that lasted a long time. Some were really short. Some just had one verse we sang over and over. I sang the songs. I tithed. I went to church. Sometimes I went to the altar, asked for forgiveness. And Paul says, but what did you do for God? Tell me some stories of the new covenant and the pouring out for the Lord. What did you do for God? And I say, well, I don't have any stories. I went to church on Sundays. How many of us can identify with that? How many of us show up, as Pastor Darren would say, we show up on Sundays, punch our time card. Okay, good for God this week. How many people don't do anything? Well, I tithed. Bible says to give my 10%. I tithed. I sang the songs. I showed up at church. Every now and then I'd feel this nastiness in my stomach and I'd go to the altar and I'd pray and I'd cry and I'm good. But what are we doing for God? If we go to Psalms 92, 4 through 9, it says, "For you, Lord, have made me glad through your works." Hear that? For you, Lord, have made me glad through your works. See, it's not our works that get us to heaven. We talk about this all the time. It's not our works that get us to heaven. It's us following Christ and knowing we have a desire to do for him. So our works is helping your neighbor, loving one another, being kind, being gentle. These are works for the Lord that we have chosen to do because we follow him. That is the works. They don't get us to heaven, but our desires to do those works becomes a real thing when we follow Christ. And you go on, it says, I will triumph in the works of your hands. O Lord, how great are your works! Your thoughts are very deep. A senseless man does not know, nor does a fool understand this. When the wicked springs up like grass, and when all the workers of iniquity flourish, means when all these bad doers, when they look like they're overpowering, hello, have you looked outside lately? It is that they may be destroyed forever. But you, Lord, are on high forevermore. For behold your enemies, O Lord, for behold your enemies shall perish. All the workers of iniquity shall be scattered. Now, I've had people tell me that, I'm a good person. I do all these kind things. I'm doing everything like God would have me do. But I think, I'm just not like, I'm not going to give my life to Christ. Sometimes it blows my mind because I'm like, you've already given your life to Christ. You just haven't called his name. Like, I get so confused over this sometimes because some people follow, never knowing. Some people know him and never follow. And it just sometimes it breaks my heart sometimes. Sometimes I get confused. We just don't know what someone else truly believes in their heart. But I do know if we're just showing up to church on Sundays and we're tithing and singing and possibly going to the altar every now and then, and you're not doing anything else outside the church, you're not doing the Lord's works for the right reasons. And if you're doing all the works and you're not believing and following his name, it's the same thing. But when you're following Christ and you're going to church and you're doing all the right things and you're following the biblical truths, and then your desire to do the works becomes greater than it being a task. That's when you're following correctly. That's when you're following the word of God and what his desires are. There's been so many times, my husband and I, we've been to all kinds of churches. Y'all know I've talked to you before about how I've gotten kicked out of churches and it makes you look back sometimes and sit and wonder, were they like the Romans? Those churches, were they like the Romans? Where these are our laws, these are our guidelines. You must follow this or you're not getting into heaven. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care who or what tells you something. If you can't get it out of the Bible, then it's not true. I'm not going to follow people. I'm going to follow God. I make mistakes all the time. I get involved in conversations and stuff sometimes that I go, "Whoa, why am I letting that in? I can't let that in. I need to be following Christ." Which means I need to be going to the church. I need to be doing these things, but I also need to be doing the works that God has me do. Now, there's so many times where people have, "Mm, Ginger, you're a little over the top. You're a little boisterous. You're a little vocal. You need to tone it down a bit for God." I want to know who has the right to tell someone else that they need to tone down how they say things. Now, granted, you got to say things with love. I get that. But if I get all excited and I'm telling you something and I'm trying to get your attention, I'm trying to get you to understand my question, or I'm getting frustrated. It's not because I'm being vocally rude. It's because I have a passion and a desire to learn and I want to get to know the Father better. And I'm frustrated because I don't understand something. You got to give me that. I would rather see somebody vocal and loud and somewhat obnoxious trying to learn for the Father. Because there's so many churches that are like, now when you teach, you need to be perfect and proper and precious. And you need to speak calmly so they get it. Not everybody is the same. If God designed us all to be the same, he wouldn't have gave us free will. Right? Everybody would be just little robots walking around doing the exact same thing at the exact same time, and everything in this world would be perfect. But it's not, because he gave me free will. So when I get excited and I get overwhelmed and I start getting a little rowdy, it's because I have a passion and a desire to learn for God. I have that same passion and desire to do the works for God. I mean, who wants to have a bingo at 11 o'clock in the morning at a senior center? I could be sleeping in, I could be doing my yard work. But my desire is to go and share the light that God has given me to pass out, hoping that in the senior place, maybe there's somebody that doesn't have a car that needs a ride to church and they ask me, I'll take them or I'll offer it to them. Or maybe, I found out yesterday the senior place that we're helping at, that we're doing these cookouts and bingo days and stuff for, I found out that they actually have a church service 2 times a week. It's the second and the fourth Sunday of the month. They have church service in that community center. I had no idea. I know a lot of people out there in in that community home, whatever you want to call it. None of them have told me anything about it. I don't think any of them knew it, because when I offer to go to church, they're like, "Yeah, I'd like to go," or, "Well, I'd like to, but I can't this Sunday," or whatever it is. They've never mentioned to me. And when I asked specifically yesterday, I asked one person, "If there was a church service here, would you be able to go to it? Would you want to go to it?" So how are they not knowing that there's a service there? Because they're not going around speaking that, "Hey, we're doing things for the Lord here." Now I'll be going out and passing out flyers again. "Hey, there's a bingo. We're having a Bible study at 10 o'clock. We're going to start bingo at 11 o'clock. And then we're going to ask, you have a church service the second and fourth Sunday of the month. Would you desire to have it on the first and third Sunday as well?" Because their desire is to find out what they need and do what God would have us do for them. All winter long, I drive the bus. I invite kids to church all the time. I can't do that in the summer months, but I can still find a way to do what the Lord would have me to do. So, are you going to go to church this Sunday? What about the rest of the week? More importantly, What are you going to do for God this week? What is your story? All the Christians, we all have a story of salvation to talk about. We can always say what God has done for us. When is the last time you got to tell that story? When is the last time you just sat with somebody and listened to them? You may not have answers for them, but you can have a heart of God and listen to them. Guys, we need 3 more people. Oh, I'm going to hang up this other one. Hold on one second. We'll see you back Monday.